Some villains are everywhere. You see their masks, you hear their quotes, you know their names. But tonight, we're talking about the ones you forgot. The villains who didn't get the memes, didn't get the Halloween costumes, didn't get the franchise spin-offs, but absolutely deserved them. From cult gems to blockbuster secrets, these are the most underrated bad guys ever put on screen. And number one, he wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, he didn't even raise his voice. But he may be the most realistic villain on this entire list. Let's rank them. Frank Booth, from Blue Velvet. Frank Booth isn't just a villain. He's emotional volatility weaponized. What makes Frank terrifying isn't power or intelligence, it's instability. He swings from childlike vulnerability to explosive violence in seconds. One moment, he's whispering. The next, he's screaming. He treats oxygen masks like comfort objects and human beings like property. Frank operates on impulse. There's no master plan, no grand ideology. He doesn't want to rule a city or save the world. He wants dominance in the moment. And that unpredictability creates tension that never releases. You can negotiate with a rational villain. You can predict a strategic one. You cannot predict chaos. Frank represents the darkness under suburban normalcy. The idea that beneath white picket fences and manicured lawns, something deeply unhinged is breathing. He's underrated because he exists inside an art house film. But psychologically, he's one of the rawest depictions of sadistic control ever put on screen. Bennett, from Commando. Bennett is obsession wrapped in muscle. In a decade full of cold, calculating action villains, Bennett feels personal. He doesn't just want to defeat John Matrix. He wants validation from him. There's something almost intimate in his taunts. It's not just rivalry, it's fixation. That's what makes him different. Most 80s villains want money, territory, revenge. Bennett wants acknowledgement. He wants to prove he's stronger, tougher, more dominant. And when someone's entire identity is tied to superiority, they become reckless. He's sweaty, emotional, loud. But beneath that theatrics is insecurity. Bennett represents fragile masculinity amplified by violence. His ego is the real antagonist. Every decision he makes is about proving himself, not winning strategically. That's why he feels unhinged rather than calculated. He's not a mastermind. He's a man who cannot accept being second. Carter Burke, from Aliens. Burke is perhaps the most realistic villain on your entire list. He doesn't scream, he doesn't posture. He smiles politely. And then he signs off on sending people into a nightmare. What makes Burke powerful is detachment. He doesn't hate anyone. He doesn't enjoy suffering. He simply calculates risk versus reward and decides human lives are expendable assets. That indifference is colder than rage. He knowingly exposes colonists to xenomorph infection for corporate gain. He attempts to smuggle alien embryos back to Earth by infecting Ripley and Newt, and when confronted, he tries to rationalize it. That's key. Burke believes he's pragmatic, forward-thinking, opportunistic. He represents late-stage corporate morality, where liability and profit outweigh ethics. He's terrifying because he doesn't think he's evil. He thinks he's ambitious. And in real life, that mindset has caused more harm than any monster. Rose the Hat, from Dr. Sleep. Rose the Hat is predation disguised as grace. She smiles warmly, speaks softly, moves elegantly. but she feeds on children's psychic suffering. Unlike chaotic horror villains, Rose operates like aristocracy. She sees herself and her group, the True Knot, as evolved beings surviving off a lesser species. That entitlement makes her frightening. She doesn't feel guilt. She doesn't feel urgency. She feels superiority, and her patience is what elevates her. She hunts across decades, manipulates across states, invades minds without raising her voice. Her calm presence contrasts violently with what she does. That's why she lingers, not because she's loud, but because she's composed. Rose represents parasitic elitism, the belief that some lives exist to sustain others. And when that belief is delivered with a smile, it becomes chilling. Calvin Candie. From Django Unchained. Candy is cruelty dressed as charm. He's educated, polite, curious, but he treats human suffering as entertainment. What makes Candy distinct is his insecurity. Beneath the aristocratic facade is a petulant, emotionally fragile man who cannot tolerate being intellectually outmatched. His violence isn't strategic like Ozymandias. It's theatrical, ego-driven. He needs to be admired, feared, superior. And when that illusion cracks, he explodes. Candy represents performative dominance, the kind that collapses when challenged. He's not just evil, he's immature power with absolute authority. Syndrome. From The Incredibles. Syndrome is resentment industrialized. He wasn't born evil. He was rejected. And instead of moving on, he builds an empire to prove superiority. His philosophy is rooted in equality, but twisted. If everyone's super, no one will be. He wants to commodify heroism, manufacture crisis, then sell salvation. That's corporate villainy disguised as progress. Syndrome is misunderstood because he's animated, often grouped with lighter antagonists. But his ideology mirrors real-world resentment politics and tech monopolization. He doesn't just want revenge. He wants to redefine power. Ozymandias. From Watchmen. Ozymandias is terrifying because he outgrows the superhero genre. He sees the world as chess pieces, governments as unstable children, heroes as sentimental obstacles. His defining trait isn't cruelty, it's calculation. He doesn't want domination, he wants legacy. He wants to be remembered as the man who saved humanity, even if no one knows he did it. And the most devastating moment? I did it 35 minutes ago. There is no final battle, no chance to stop him. The moral argument is over before the heroes arrive. That removes the comfort of victory from the audience. Ozymandias forces viewers to confront a brutal ethical question. If peace requires horror, is it still peace? That's why he isn't just underrated. He's philosophically uncomfortable. Immortan Joe. From Mad Max Fury Road. Immortan Joe isn't just a villain. He's a civilization. In a wasteland where resources are God, Joe understands one truth better than anyone else. Control the essentials, control the people. Water, fuel, breeding. He hoards them all. But what elevates him beyond a standard post-apocalyptic tyrant is theology. Joe doesn't just ration water, he turns it into spectacle. He releases it like divine mercy while crowds scream and worship. That's not survival. That's manufactured dependence. He engineers scarcity and then positions himself as salvation. Immortan Joe builds religion around himself. The war boys chant, spray chrome on their teeth, cry out, "Witness me!" as they charge toward death. He convinces dying young men that dying for him guarantees eternal glory. That's psychological mastery. He weaponizes desperation and transforms it into devotion. Unlike chaotic villains, Joe understands systems. He creates hierarchy. War boys as disposable soldiers, the wives as controlled reproduction, the masses as dehydrated believers. He doesn't need to patrol the wasteland personally. He built a structure that enforces itself. That's systemic evil at its most efficient. Ben Willis, from I Know What You Did Last Summer. Before Ghostface dominated the late 90s, there was The Hook. Ben Willis isn't flashy. He doesn't monologue. He doesn't philosophize. He stalks. And what makes him underrated isn't just the rain-soaked dock scenes or the fisherman coat. It's the motive. He isn't killing for chaos. He's killing because they thought they got away with it. That changes everything. This isn't random violence. It's consequence. Every letter, every shadow, every slow walk down a foggy pier is guilt materializing. Unlike louder horror icons, Ben Willis represents something much more uncomfortable. The past doesn't stay buried. And that final reveal, when the accident becomes something far darker, that's not just horror. That's paranoia. Which is why he deserves way more credit in the 90s villain conversation. Now brace yourself for our top pick. Grand Moff Tarkin. From Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Before Darth Vader became the face of evil, there was the man who ordered a planet destroyed. No force powers, no mask, no rage, just authority. Tarkin doesn't need theatrics. He doesn't even raise his voice when he commands the destruction of Alderaan. That calmness is the horror. He represents something far more terrifying than a Sith Lord. Bureaucratic evil. Calculated, administrative, efficient. He doesn't kill out of passion. He doesn't even enjoy it. He sees it as policy. And that's why he's underrated. In a franchise dominated by lightsabers and destiny, Tarkin is pure institutional control. He proves you don't need mystical power to dominate a galaxy. You just need rank and the will to use it. He doesn't fight the hero. He doesn't duel. He signs the order, and millions die. That is blockbuster-level villainy hiding in plain sight. We called them underrated, overlooked, forgotten, hidden behind louder monsters. But maybe that's not true. Maybe some of them weren't ignored. Maybe they were misunderstood. Was Grand Moff Tarkin just a cold bureaucrat, or the purest form of systemic evil? Was Ben Willis just a slasher, or the embodiment of guilt catching up? Was Ozymandias a monster, or the only one willing to do what others wouldn't? So here's the real question. Which one of these villains isn't underrated, but misunderstood? If we're being honest, the one who isn't underrated, but misunderstood, is Ozymandias from Watchmen. Here's why. Most people label him a monster because of the body count, but Ozymandias isn't chaotic. He isn't impulsive. He isn't driven by ego in the traditional sense. He genuinely believes he's saving humanity. And the uncomfortable part? He succeeds. He prevents global nuclear war. He creates unity through shared trauma. He achieves the peace every other character failed to secure. That's not cartoon villainy. That's moral extremism. He's misunderstood because audiences want villains to be clearly evil, Ozymandias forces us into a moral gray zone. Was he wrong? Yes, because mass murder is indefensible. Was he irrational? No. And that distinction is what makes him different from the others on your list. Grand Moff Tarkin isn't misunderstood. He's cold, authoritarian power. Ben Willis isn't misunderstood. He's revenge weaponized. Carter Burke isn't misunderstood. He's corporate greed. But Ozymandias? He's the only one whose logic almost convinces you. And that's what makes him dangerous. Not because he's evil, but because part of you understands why he did it. That's not underrated. That's deeply, disturbingly misunderstood. So what do you think? Tell us in the comments. And please, be sure to like, subscribe, and return to our channel for more villainology. See you in the next video.